It's very vulnerable for a leader to let go of control and make space for other people to maybe make mistakes at their encouragement, because then you are also responsible for their mistakes. And it can be scary.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, we're here with Jessica Katz, and we're going to be talking about leading through consent. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, stay tuned. We're going to find out more about what that is and why you should care. So Jessica is an expert in organizational development and executive coaching. She's into agile methodologies, a deep background in agile. So we're birds of a feather. She's a lover of board games and also video games. Jessica, how about you tell us more about yourself? Fill in the gaps.
Sure. So my background, my degree is in information technology. And what I found is nobody wants me coding anything. And instead, I found a love of project management. Project management led me into the agile world and then up into enterprise enterprise work and organizational development work. I would say most recently, the board game I played most recently is really a card game, Race for the Galaxy. If you've ever played it, it's fun. It takes a while to figure out the strategy in it, which I liked. I usually pick up strategies pretty quickly, so it was a nice, fun challenge for me. So that's a little bit of history and it's also fun stuff.
So would my 10-year-old who really likes chess, so he's got like that strategic mind, would he enjoy that game?
That one might be a little much, but I would recommend, if you've got that age group, to try Gizmos.
Gizmos. Okay. I'm going to look it up.
Right.
Sure, it's on Amazon. I'll get it and try it out with him. So, Jess, tell us about a book that you've been reading lately that has made an impact on you.
Sure thing. So I primarily have been reading fictional books, but I have been revisiting a book recently, Cultures and Organizations, Software of the Mind by Hofstede and Minkoff. And it is, I'll have to display it on the screen here, if that's all right, this book here. Yeah. And essentially talks about humans in the vein of like, what is our operating system? So it breaks it down into a way that we would understand from a technological perspective. And I find it correlates really nicely with Conway's Law. Any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. And it is our culture that forms our communication structure. I've been digging back into this one to help a couple of clients dig through what's going on in their culture.
That sounds like a book that I really want to get to know. For one thing, years ago when I was kind of reinventing myself, changing careers, and I decided to start calling myself, instead of like a CEO or a tech leader or a project manager or whatever the title I had to come up with, I decided to call myself a people developer. And I mean, I've been a software developer for the longest time, but when I discovered the power of investing in and developing people, I was hooked. And that book that you just mentioned sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
Not that people are like, are dumb machines that we can just kind of go in and muck around with, but people can, and they do respond to our attempts to develop them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this book also digs into some of the differences in culture based on where you're from. And in this world of distributed teams, it's got a lot of good nuggets in there.
Awesome. Also right up my alley, because my entire team and even myself, we're all completely distributed and moving targets even. So Jessica, tell us about a time that you made an embarrassing mistake as a tech leader. This is what I call confession time.
Confession time.
Yeah.
It was really, really early in my career. So this is the one that I thought I could do and it wouldn't feel too vulnerable.
All right.
It's a little vulnerable, right? Super early in my career, I was a project manager. And back in the day when we did project management, project managers were every hat except for the coder hat. We wrote requirements. We were the business analysts. We were the testers. We were the product owners. You name it, we were wearing them all. And my key stakeholder, my executive stakeholder, and I made the decision to to introduce our product to the entire community all at once. And of course, we didn't have time for testing because back in the day, you always shrunk testing. And during the login, somebody typed their login information wrong. And because of one character of code, the whole system failed.
Ooh.
No one could log in. It came to a grinding halt. Now, we were able to find it and fix it really fast, but we already had egg on our face. So that was a really tough situation that we had in that moment. And I would say the main thing I learned from that is to pay attention to the risks, right? And take the time to do the quality testing. Do less in the product and more in the testing if it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm. So I would add two things. I've had something similar, if you've been in tech long enough, who hasn't had something like that happen? So one thing I would say is, if anybody is still pushing things to production from their IDE, like FTPing files up to something, and that's your delivery mechanism, then stop it. There's no rollback.
Yeah.
You can't undo that.
Yeah, it was a really long time ago. We were doing good practices for the time, and we've all learned better, and now there's better practices.
Another thing that's also very close to something that I'm just dealing with right now is, because I'm working on it's going to be so good, a course from Pearson in DevOps and development and deployment strategies. It's on my mind because I've been working on it for a long time. It's going to be that good. I hope, fingers crossed. But yeah, rollbacks is a big thing. And when things go wrong, which they probably will, you need something that's going to roll it back. And that's not what this podcast is supposed to be about today. You're triggering me.
I understand. I think it's a trigger everybody with any history in tech has. So this is the right embarrassing moment to share.
Yes, it's very good. Very good. I identify with that story very well. All right, so we don't want to talk about or get too deep into just technology itself, because even though that's who we are and what we do, really today what we want to talk about is leading through consent. This is a cool concept that I want to introduce to our audience today. And Jessica, you just happen to know a lot about it, and you got some experience with it. So just tell us, for starters, what do we mean by leading through consent?
Yeah. So we hear a lot of times about managers who are micromanaging, who are directive. They're telling you how to do it and what to do. Leading through consent really moves us away from power over to power among. And we want to move to a place where we are sharing the power, leaving space for people to be independent, autonomous humans without retribution, right? So we make space for them to be independent. And it means things like this. At 4:00 on a Friday, if you're a leader and you've sent an email to an employee saying, please do this, they know they can say, it's Friday and it's about to leave in an hour and I can't get it done in this hour. What was your target time? What are your expectations for this work? How about if I get to it Monday or Tuesday after the weekend? And they feel safe to say those things. And even better, a leader who's leading with consent is doing things like, I know it's 4:00 on a Friday. Here's my expectations. Here's when this is due. Do you think you can add this to your plate? What other priorities do you have? Let's negotiate this work so that it gets done in the time that I'm expecting it. Or it gets moved to somebody who does have the time, right? That sort of perspective.
So when you say consent, it doesn't sound like in every request you are asking them for consent to make the request. It almost sounds like a cultural response to requests.
Yeah, it is. It's creating a culture where both yes and no and counter offering are accepted and welcome. And creates a culture where there's a reduction in retribution. We're not going to give people, you said no 20 times, so I'm going to write you up, right? We're not doing that. That sort of thing. And you start to see people not as working for you, but working with you. And now they have the equal standing to come to the table and negotiate the work that's happening.
Yeah. I can see some parallels even with just regular project management when you've got a new task. As a product owner, I've got a new task that I want done, a new feature that I want to have implemented. if I go to my team, this is not exactly parallel, but I'm getting some connections. If I describe to them the thing that I want built, then if I haven't asked them for an estimate, then I'm training my team to ask me for an estimate. So at some point, we all are asking for the estimate. And then on the other side of the estimate, the estimate doesn't then become a dictator and tell us when we must have the thing finished. It's more of a communication piece where the team is telling me, okay, I think this is going to take 8 hours. My expectation was 30 minutes. Now we get to have a conversation about the substance of the thing that I was asking for and clearing up the doubts. Okay, maybe I was off base. Maybe I'm out of touch. These things now take 8 hours and it's justifiable. Or they can say, we were going to build blah, 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 all these, A to Z things. And then I can say, well, actually, I just wanted ABC, not
Right.
ABC to Z. And then it allows us to have those conversations. Now that I've described that, I kind of feel like I'm getting off base from leading with consent, but it kind of feels like that whole cultural package that we're trying to build.
Yeah, there's an acronym that actually comes from Planned Parenthood on consent. And I know that's not really our focus areas. Oh, I'm going to crosswalk it over to business world. Consent basically means it was freely given. I really, truly, without feeling coerced, without feeling like I had to say yes, said yes, right? That's real. It's reversible. If I get into it halfway through and I realize it's going to take 8 hours when I only thought it was going to take 3, I come back and we renegotiate, right? It is informed, which means I have all the information. And I think what you're getting at is making all the implicit knowledge explicit, really putting it out there so people can know what they're saying yes to. The next one in this acronym, this is spelling fries, by the way. The next one in this acronym is enthusiastic. And enthusiastic is not something that happens typically in work. They're not like, yeah, I can't wait to do this work. That's not really what's happening. But it is authentic. It is, yes, I authentically agree to do this work, right? And then it's specific, right? So we hear that in SMART goals all the time. It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, right? And so on. So that specific really lines up to things like acceptance criteria and how do we know what success looks like and what's the definition of done here. So those kinds of things blend in to making it possible for somebody to really authentically say yes. In a Scrum environment, this would be the team's sprint planning, right? At the end of sprint planning, they say, yes, we're going to get these things done in 2 weeks. That's an authentic consent-driven culture where the team selected the work from the backlog, not where the product owner dictated the work from the backlog.
Yeah. I have experienced both. And I can definitely say it feels a lot better when the dev team has an authentic say in how much they are going to accept into a sprint.
Right.
But then I discovered Kanban, and oh my goodness.
I know I love Kanban too. I like
we
them
need
both.
to have a whole episode on why Kanban just rocks. Well, again, sorry, I digress.
Wait, all right. I mean, I could be on that episode with you. I would be with you too. Kanban does rock. It is very different from Scrum, but also not very different from Scrum. It's kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get back on track. What does leading through consent have to do with human flourishing?
Well, do you remember the study that came out from Google? It was a Project Aristotle study where they found that psychological safety was the number one differentiator for a team's success.
I do remember that.
Yep. So, and I can give you a link for it later. You can put it in the show notes or whatever. But but psychological safety is the number one differentiator. And there's another book reference, Psychological Safety by Dan Radecki and Leonie Hull. Right? Awesome. They have a lovely little acronym for safety. And the first one is security. So generally speaking, we flourish better when we know we don't have to worry about our food and shelter. And, food and shelter is tied to continued pay. So when we feel generally safe in our role and that our world isn't going to disrupt overnight. The second letter in this is autonomy. And what we're really getting to here is autonomy. I get to choose what's happening to me and by me and where I'm spending my time and energy so that I stay passionate. Now, I know not everybody's passionate about everything they do in their work. I'm not passionate about doing the dishes either, but they got to get done, right? So sometimes you got to do things because they got to get done. That's where that authentic and not enthusiastic yes comes in. But to make the choice, the conscious choice, somebody has to do the dishes. I'm available to do the dishes. I will do the dishes, right? Is a place to feel like you have autonomy. And what we're talking about here is giving people a sense of autonomy. There's a couple other things we're talking about here too. The next one in this acronym is fairness, and I would use equity here. It means everybody's being treated the same. You don't get better treatment because you're the senior VP. You get the same treatment as the person on the front lines as the CEO does, right? Everybody's getting equal treatment. The next one is esteem. So value would be the word we'd put with this. Do I know how I rank up with other people? Am I doing good work? Do people see I'm doing good work? Can I tell that I'm doing good work? Am I getting rewarded? All of those things. And we usually see those in rewards and recognitions programs. So we're not really hitting that one in consent-based cultures. And then the next one is trust. And the word I would use here for instead of trust, because I think trust is a consequence of a good culture, that the word I would use here is belonging. We all belong, and my voice is heard, and I belong in this group, and I'm not ignored, and I'm not ostracized. I'm part of the conversation. The very last letter of safety is U, and that's all the weird stuff that we individually bring to our needs from psychological safety perspective. Like when I'm really short, I'm 5'2". So when I'm in a conflict with somebody, I prefer if we sit down so I don't feel like people are looming over me. That's a specific thing for me to feel safe in an environment. And your people, once they have the other ones, start to feel safe enough to speak that as well and to say, hey, I could use this. So when we get to psychological safety, when we think about human flourishing, when we get to that, people bloom. They stop worrying about, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And they start coming to the table as an equal who's engaged in the content. Now, not 100% of the time, right? It's very hard to have 100% of your employee population engaged. But if you can get them to engagement, if you can get psychological safety on board, you will get them to engagement, and then engagement leads to all this other benefits for the organization.
Well, so this is good stuff. I mean, it's bound to produce great results for the business, for your product, your team, and for the individual. We talked about how the whole group gets to flourish when we are leading through consent and setting up this kind of culture. So if it's so good, why don't more leaders do this?
It's slower. It is slower, and it also requires you to face your own shortcomings. If you're in an environment where you have been promoted because of your ideas and your success, and now you're in a leadership position where you are looking to have your ideas and your success get you further, it's a shift in focus. Now you're going to elevate and enable other people's ideas and excellence. And that can be really scary for a leader, especially in a culture that is promoting based on hierarchy or meritocracy or those sorts of things. If we are in an organization that is like, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time, it doesn't really matter what level you are, you're doing that job and I'm doing this one, right? If you're in that kind of environment, there's less competition in the space. So that's one thing. The other thing that happens when you start doing this is it's very vulnerable for a leader to let go of control and make space for other people to maybe make mistakes at their encouragement, because then you are also responsible for their mistakes. And it can be scary. So it really starts to filter into their own security and their own psychological safety. You know, leaders generally are carrying three roles. They're an advocate for the company and whatever the company wants to achieve. They're an advocate for the employee and whatever will make the employee succeed. And they're an advocate for themselves and their continued growth in their own role. So we're dealing with security and esteem there for them. And yeah, rewards and recognition, right? Those three roles are frequently in conflict. And this is often where I come in and coach, like, okay, let's talk about what's getting in your way. Let's write it all out. Let's think about, okay, as the advocate for the company, as the advocate for the employee, as the advocate for yourself, what's true? And let's slice it out and see if we can't come up with a way forward that solves for all three.
So I'll throw out another group of people.
Yeah.
It might be that this person fits into the other categories that you mentioned, but I'm just thinking about like in our audience or just in general, tech leaders. A lot of times, especially if they're in the software development area like I am, a lot of times a tech leader, a VP, a manager, or a CTO is basically a former software developer, a former contributor. And they may or may not have been working in companies that were great examples of culture and excellence. And so they may be leading from the seat of their pants. And they may not even know that this idea, this concept exists, much less how to get there, like how to go from where they are today into something that is, that would be considered this great, healthy culture where everybody is contributing and mutually and equally.
Yeah, who you're describing is incredibly common. I come from an individual contributor and now I'm leading and I don't know how to lead and nobody's giving me any training on how to lead. And if I emulate my leaders...
No MBA, no training.
Right. And if I emulate my leaders, I already know that environment's not good because I didn't like it. So now they're trying to figure out how to do different. It's kind of like, after you graduate high school and maybe college, if you choose college and you get into your 20s, there's this moment where you look back and you're like, my parents were nuts. They didn't know what they were doing. And so you start experimenting yourself with different things to try. And that is often what those leaders end up doing. They start experimenting or they start copying. And it's a perfectly normal, very human approach to figuring your way through a thing. But it does mean that sometimes you make a mess along the way.
Yeah. Well, considering how hard we work in this podcast to make sure that everybody knows what we stand for, I'd be surprised if somebody's listening to this episode and they haven't already started down this road, or they wouldn't. I'm guaranteeing pretty much that our audience is wanting to go down this road. They want to improve. They want to start really contributing to the humans in their groups. So let's just say that somebody is listening to this episode today. They're feeling inspired. They want to start leading through consent. They want to build this great culture. What are we already mentioned that it takes patience, right?
Uh-huh.
That's pitfall number one. Don't expect that it's going to happen overnight. It's not even going to happen fast. Like it might take, I don't know, months, years to actually build this healthy culture. We do want to kind of give some practical steps about how to get there. We'll get to that here in just a few minutes. But assuming that somebody is starting to go down this road, what are some pitfalls besides patience, that it takes patience, that they might find?
They may think they're good at listening and they're not yet. That is a pitfall that's pretty common. And they're not hearing either the vocal voices that are happening in the space or the silence. And it's the silence that's one of the hardest things to hear. Really key tip that your listeners can take away is that they should stop talking in meetings. That they could pose a question, a short what or how open-ended question, and then not talk and see what shows up. I had this really fantastic director that I worked with for a while. He was the director of a BI group, and he came to me and he's like, I don't understand why they won't talk. Like, we have all these ideas. I don't understand why they won't talk. And I was like, have you ever recorded any of your meetings and then just seen how much space you're taking up, how much airtime you have versus how much airtime they have? And he's like, no. I was like, why don't you just get permission? Tell them you're going to delete it afterwards. Then listen to the conversation after the fact. Give it a day. Listen to the conversation after the fact and put it into one of those transcription things and see how many minutes you talk versus how many minutes they talk. And he came back and he was like, holy cow, I take up all the air in the room. So no wonder they don't speak. And that is often the case, right? Lots of leaders feel like they need to insert their ideas or they need to talk or they need to guide. And you will find more amazing things show up in your silence than would ever show up if you were talking. So that's a pretty easy pitfall to get over. The next pitfall, I would say, is they make assumptions about what people want, think, and feel. And in your one-on-ones, you should be using those one-on-ones to find out what people value, what their personal goals are, what they like about their work, what they don't like about their work, what personal challenges they're trying to get through. Like maybe you've got one who has a hard time speaking in front of people, and there might be an opportunity you could give them to do a lunch and learn on a topic they're really passionate about. Or maybe you can find somebody in there who is really struggling with this one area of the code and they can't seem to get help from their team. And you could help them develop their own strategies for how to get that help from the team. And notice I said help them develop their own strategies, not give them answers, but help them figure out their way to solving those problems. And what you're doing is creating future leaders. You're not trying to keep them in their individual contributor role. So that may be another pitfall, right? Trying to hold them in that spot that they're in.
Yeah. There may be others, but I think that once people can go down the road a bit, experiment with some things and start to be really mindful of what they're doing and what's coming out the other end, I'm confident that they're going to be able to get through whatever pitfalls they find. These are a good leg up. It's a good leg up on how to get through all that. Jess, can you share a time when leading through consent led to some unexpected results for you and your team?
Yeah. Well, that director I talked about was a delightful outcome, right? He sort of popped through and was like, oh my God, I am taking up too much space. And he strategized on how to stop taking up space. And we started working on powerful questions. If you type into Google powerful questions, you'll find the leads on all of this. But the powerful questions is a coaching technique where you ask a open-ended what or how question that leads people to their own conclusions. And so he and I started working on that skill in our engagement. And he started asking questions and not talking. And it was really hard for him. I was like, okay, slow count to 15, give him a minute to get there. And he's like, oh, I don't know if I can handle it. It's like, you can warn him, you can tell him you're not going to answer your own questions anymore, that you're going to give space for them to answer and think about it. And lo and behold, the very next meeting he had with people, he was like, holy cow, they had all kinds of ideas and they were really great ideas. And they got to start implementing them. So that was like a really small, like, this is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
I worked with another group that didn't have an explicit cultural intention, right? They hadn't identified their values or what it is their mission was. It was a grant writing group out of University of Alabama. And I went and sat with them. It was a team of, I think it was 7, including their like students and contractors, right? And we started building it. And they identified that we worked a little bit on nonviolent communication, which is another really fantastic book, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Marshall something. And
the show notes would be full of books on this one.
It's full of books. I should have warned you. I read so much. Answering the question, what's one book I've been reading lately, was tough.
Okay.
Yeah. So we worked on nonviolent communication, and what they discovered, they leaned into a healthy conflict during that conversation. And what they discovered is they had a person in the space that was creating, I'm going to put this in air quotes, violent communication, which is really just communication that triggers people and isn't empathetic. And that person talked to the person who was leading this group and said, maybe this isn't the right spot for me, and I need to find another path. And they worked on designing how to get her to her other path together and what she could do in the meantime to be better in that space until that other path materialized. And that's a pretty amazing outcome. I mean, you don't often hear about bosses or organizations being like, yes, let me support you in your dreams that have nothing to do with us. And this leader really leaned into empathy and embracing his people where they were and helping them get to where they wanted to be.
That sounds awesome.
Yes, it was pretty great.
So let's give our listeners today some practical advice on how they can start leading through consent. I know we've mentioned a few things. We can bring them back up if we want to, or there may be some other things that we can share. But I really want to give people something they can sink their teeth into, that they can even do tomorrow or today. What should we start doing today to promote human flourishing in our teams?
Stop talking, start listening. That's going to be a big one, right? And get curious. You're going to be surprised. When you stop talking and start listening, you're going to be surprised. And it is easy for you to, if it wasn't your idea or it isn't something that you think is a good idea, it's easy to shut it down. So get curious about what's great about the ideas instead of focusing on what's not great about the ideas. Do a yes and exercise. Yes, that's interesting. And that can be a really beautiful way to start leaning into at least the place where you're starting to collaborate with people instead of dictating to people.
So there's to add another book to the list. There's a book, and if you haven't read it yet, then I'm going to celebrate.
I'm ready.
Multipliers.
I have read it. I love that book.
Okay. All right. So you may already see the correlation, connection. But it's such a good book, like learning to care deeply about the genius in everyone and changing your expectations about them. If you know that people have a way that they are going to be, they have a way of having, what am I trying to say here? They have an inner genius. We just have to help them understand it or uncover it, or we have to get out of the way so that they can show it. But when we lead through consent and we build that of openness and contribution, then we'd probably come to expect that everyone should be multiplying the genius of everybody instead of by closing people down or like giving people tasks at 4 p.m. and not giving people a way to push back on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, honestly, we're all just hairless monkeys, and we have a monkey see, monkey do is not a false cliche there. That's if you as a leader start behaving this way, the people that work for you will start behaving this way. So it does multiply. We copy our leaders without fail.
Jessica, how can people connect with you?
Well, they can find me at polylabor.com. There's a connect option in there, or they can find me on LinkedIn under Jessica Katz. And for those of you that don't come from the Northeast, that's spelled Katz. Either one will work. That's a great way to connect. And yeah, I think that's probably the best solution.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes too. It's
cool.
It'll be a mile long for this episode. It'll be great.
I should have warned you.
Lot of valuable links though, and I do hope that people connect with you. And Jessica, thank you so much for the conversation. It's been really interesting, and I can't wait for times we can do this again. Maybe we'll talk about Kanban.
I would love it. Thank you so much for your time.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.